The night was supposed to be simple. One charity gala, one appearance, one favor returned. That was it. I stood under crystal chandeliers that cost more than most people's houses, surrounded by politicians, investors, and fake smiles polished with expensive wine. Every conversation felt rehearsed. Every laugh was calculated. I hated these events, but my reputation depended on them. That's why I hired an escort. Someone poised, elegant, discreet. Someone who would play the role without complications. When she walked in, the room shifted. Not because she was loud, because she wasn't. She moved like she belonged there. Black dress flowing like it had been tailored for secrets, not cameras. When she took my arm, her touch was light, professional, practiced. Yet her eyes weren't. They held something raw, something awake. Throughout the evening, she spoke when needed, smiled when expected, and stayed silent when conversations turned sharp. Too perfect, too controlled. At one point, a senator leaned in too close, and before I could react, she redirected him with a sentence so sharp and graceful it left him laughing and retreating. I looked at her differently then. During a pause near the balcony, the city glowing below us, she leaned closer, not to be heard, but to be honest. Her voice dropped. "Can I ask you something?" I nodded. She hesitated, then whispered, "My age isn't a problem." Right? Time slowed. Music faded. I didn't answer immediately, not because I was judging, but because the question wasn't what shocked me. It was the fear behind it. I asked calmly, "How old are you?" She met my eyes. "I'm 23, I just get asked that a lot." Relief hit first, then confusion, then curiosity. She wasn't asking for approval. She was asking for safety, for respect. The rest of the night felt different. Conversations blurred. The contract didn't, but the distance between us did. And when the gala ended, I realized something unsettling. I didn't want the night to end at all. Soft pause for narration. If this story has pulled you in already, don't forget to subscribe, because what happens next changes everything. The car ride was quiet, but not awkward. The city lights streaked across the windows like unfinished thoughts. I asked her why she did this work. She didn't give a dramatic answer. She said, "Because it pays for my independence, and because people underestimate me." That honesty hit harder than any flirtation could. I told her she didn't have to continue the night. The contract allowed her to leave. She studied me for a long moment, then smiled. Not the professional one, the real one. "I know," she said, "but I want to." That was the moment everything shifted. Not into something reckless, but into something real. We talked, really talked, about choices, about masks, about how people decide who you are before asking. Hours passed, no lines crossed, no promises made. Yet the connection felt heavier than most relationships I'd rushed into before. When dawn hinted at the horizon, she stood, adjusted her coat, and said, "Tonight wasn't what I expected." I replied, "Same." She paused at the door. "If you ever want to see me again." Not as an escort. She didn't finish. She didn't need to. I nodded. Weeks later, I'd see her again. Not in a ballroom, not under chandeliers, but in a small cafe where no one knew our names. That's where the real story began. Not the one people would judge, but the one we chose. And sometimes the most powerful moments in life don't start with attraction. They start with a single whispered question. Closing narration. If you believe stories should be bold, emotional, and unforgettable, subscribe now. The next story might be the one you never stop thinking about. Weeks passed after the gala, yet she never left my thoughts. Not in the way fleeting attractions usually fade, but like an unfinished sentence that keeps repeating in your head. I tried returning to routine, meetings, flights, deals that moved numbers instead of hearts. But something had shifted. I found myself noticing silence more, wondering who people really were once the performance ended. One evening, without overthinking it, I walked into that cafe she'd mentioned. Small, quiet, ordinary in a city obsessed with appearances. She was already there, sitting by the window, hair loose, wearing jeans and a simple jacket. No glamour, no role, just her. When our eyes met, there was surprise, then relief. We talked for hours, about her childhood, about mine. but how she learned early that survival sometimes looks like confidence. She told me escorting wasn't about selling herself. It was about controlling the room before it controlled her. I told her wealth wasn't freedom, it was pressure disguised as comfort. Somewhere between coffee refills and laughter, I realized something terrifying. I trusted her, not because she was perfect, but because she was honest about not being. As the nights continued, the lines grew clearer instead of blurrier. We agreed on boundaries. Respect first. Choice always. Yet emotions don't follow contracts. One night she asked softly, "Are you ashamed of me?" The question cut deeper than she knew. I answered immediately, "No, I'm afraid of losing. Something real in a world that survives on." Pretending, she smiled sadly. "Then don't pretend." That's when I made a decision that would change both our lives. I stopped hiding her. I introduced her, not as an escort, not as a secret, but as someone I cared about. The backlash was immediate. Whispers, judgments, business. Partners questioning my judgment, friends warning me she'd ruin me. She heard it all, and one night she tried to leave. Packed bag, eyes full of pain. "I won't be the reason you fall," she said. I stopped her. Not with money, not with promises, but with truth. "If I fall," I said, "it'll be because I chose something real over something safe." She stayed. Not because she needed me, but because for the first time, someone saw her without calculating her worth. And as the world kept judging, we kept choosing each other. Because sometimes love doesn't arrive wrapped in approval. Sometimes it arrives as a question whispered in fear and becomes the bravest answer of your life. Soft, emotional pause. If this chapter touched you, subscribe to the channel. Stories like this don't come from fantasy, they come from truth, courage, and choosing connection over comfort.